Alright, so let's start with the extras by doing it. If you remember what Al told us, by inputting the Konami code while you're playing one of the core Call of it, something will happen. It's a bit
There's
hard
a
to
weird
execute.
chance.
It's a bit hard to execute because it's not a case where you need to press start and while on pause you need to do that. You need to do that in game. There you go. Costume change.
Welcome to your nightmares for the next week.
I've seen worse.
Oh, the enemy's laughing at him.
Now remember, this is the level where, you know, he's going against Nefarious in his you know, fusing base. Anyway,
We're pointing at him and laughing.
here's the 2 for you armor of this game. God, it's the one that you get from the Inferno boxes.
Ah, so this is where the developers for that scrapped Mega Man X reboot got their inspiration.
And
here's
how the RYNO works. In this case, it launches a series of rays that coalesce into a nuclear explosion. It tries to be a bit similar to the Zodiac of the first game, of the second game, sorry.
You know, that suit looks like what would happen if you melded Darth Vader's with Master Chiefs and Doom Guys and painted it orange. Like, I'll say this. It's kind of amazing that Ratchet & Clank managed to go relatively unscathed during the dark and edgy thing where almost every mascot platformer character got edgified, essentially.
I will make an argument.
Jack and Daxter.
Anyway, that's also... Anyway, there you go, you also get a lightsaber as a weapon with bigger range. Also, I will make an argument, Joe, that it resembles more a Helgast helmet from Killzone, but sure.
Well, you know what? It also reminds me a bit of the angry-looking armor from Space Marines.
Well, like I said, this Killzone being released around the same time makes more sense to me. Anyway, you also get the standard sheets like Big Head mode, but again, I'm not showcasing all of them because they're relatively simple. Anyway, for the skins, you get the Ratchet from the first game, Snowman, like from the second game, the Tuxedo, of course, a Buggynoid, an Insectoid, one based on the B2 Brawler, a generic robot, another generic robot, another generic robot, one more different, okay, Sumo Ratchet, like I said, the Ninja Ratchet, there you go, also a Santa costume, and by inputting a specific code, also Jesus Christ, that looks awful, I'm sorry, Merry Christmas everyone.
Yeah.
And by inputting a specific code that I can do that on the menu, if I recall correctly.
Hippo Saru.
There it is, the People Saru from Hate Escape.
Ratchet, why are you dressed up as a monkey?
It's all part of the special super secret prize, Clank.
Of course.
And what prize is that, I wonder?
A monkey suit.
A monkey.
Anyway, those are the skill points instead. That, again, they are a bit hard to... Some of them tend to be a bit hard to get, but as you can see, I managed to get all of them this time around.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the snowman with Dan's face returns.
Very nice.
Here are instead all of the statues that you can acquire.
There's Clanks, there's Quarks, Nefarious, Scrunch,
the monkey.
Yeah.
Monkey.
Lawrence.
The plumber. Also, if you forget, he was also in the... He's also giving a time to mention. If you pay attention, in the final scene where everyone is seeing Clank's new movie, Skid was already once again in his regular form instead of being still roboticized. So he got off screen even with that. Anyway, these are trophies that you get by completing the side task, of the game, like upgrading your astronaut to the max, and that gives you an entrance to the Insomniac Museum. Okay, so it's a bit easier than than usual.
Time to do some deep diving for knowledge.
Basically, although if I recall correctly, it's just called Insomniac Museum instead of Planet Burbank.
Huh?
If I recall correctly, the descriptions are in text this time around instead of actually being read by the staff. So when they show up. There's a lot actually to go for. Also, there was an Ed 209 parallel. Saw that.
Cute.
Alright, start with this one. Our QA testers put their heads together and came up with a number of friendly, hard hacker puzzles. See if you're good enough to actually beat them.
Weird.
From Ed Kim.
Weirdly, these aren't voice acted this time.
Powers. Well, like I just mentioned. Chris Tony. Brian Vernal, and Tyler Moore. I wonder what these people are doing these days.
What a colorful cast of characters.
Well, again, they're mostly, fans. Also, the Uwe Ball, what are you doing here? Early on, we planned to have turbo slider races, including Ratchet Clank 3. Due to lack of time, however, they were eventually cut. However, you can still drive around in your racetrack ever to be created. Again, something that I mentioned early on in the early parts. There you go. Florana was supposed to have a turbo slider track using this vehicle. Particle track I'm gonna use now. There you go. Again, nothing too spectacular, but you can tell this is just an alpha test.
Especially with how bright everything is.
And, I'm finishing in terms of polygons.
One of the biggest tells to beta footage is its light, because they haven't inserted in all the lighting mechanisms.
Yeah, the lighting effect seems to be one of the last things that they put in.
It makes sense.
Again, it's nothing too fanciful, but you can, even the collision flags. But you can kind of tell that they just abandoned it, and we're just put it there for the sake of preservation and telling it exactly, which is a good gesture. Like I
feel like there were some glimpses of it in the final boss with Nefarious, where you have to use that Doom buggy around the track.
Which is similar to the one that he used on the Tyrannoid's own world. So.
I'm wondering if that was their way of paying homage while doing with what they could in the main game.
As usual, you can edit, you can also create your own custom puzzle with this, but again, not gonna use it.
Yeah, no, it would be cool if more games had deleted scenes.
This is Captain
like
Blackstar, the original boss enemy at the end of Core Comic 1. He ultimately proved too complex and he was cut. Yeah, this is also why it was weird that you got the giant serpent at the end, or eel, whatever it was, instead of this guy, which was foreshadowed from the beginning.
Interestingly enough, he is given a full-on 3D model, even though he was supposed to show up in the vid comic.
Well, those are 3D models, they're just, showcasing a miniature size.
What I mean is, like, well, they had him in the perspective, whatnot. Yeah.
What the fuck?
Those are, not too flaccid looking.
Let's see what this guy is seeing. Oh, there's a dog photo. Must have been, one of the staff dogs.
Alright. Let's have a look at the,
Originally, if any team in multiplayer control all nodes in a battlefield, this monstrosity will appear and wreak havoc across the map. It was ultimately cut because it was too complex. So yeah, they were going to have an Ed 209 equivalent, just, trying to balance things out.
Dude, I bet you would have been able to pilot one if you hacked
into
it.
No, it was kind of a third, thing to make sure one team was not winning too much. Great drawing by Joachim Barlow served as inspiration for one of the gladiator enemies. That's actually kind of cool. Again, it's always the create your enemy fan contest from Cure Kids. Also, tank battle. Again, you don't really use this outside of a multiplayer, so you know there's that.
The tank controls are fine enough, ironically.
Oh, they're literally for a tank, so I hope they will work.
Where else to go in Insomniac offices?
Well, this is the original Mass Captain Corp War when Ratchet first found Team of Lorana. It was found to be too silly and was replaced with one a little more somber.
We needed to give him some dignity after all.
Yeah, and possibly something less racist. There's a password. If I recall correctly, it serves for one of the costumes that you can get. I don't remember exactly how that works. This robotic cannon was originally intended as a weapon for Ratchet Clank 2. The so-called Hound of Doom was supposed to seek enemies, attack and then hang on to them till they shook him off or were defeated. That's not too bad as a concept, but I can imagine why it did not work out. Would it require a bit more, work to have the collision specifically for the hanging out? This is one of the early designs for the overship vehicle, which can be found in both the single and multiplayer parts of Ratchet Clank 3. What's on this monitor? Another password. Magman. What's instead on this? Level trigonometry. Oh! Yeah. These enemies were originally for Planet Dax, so they were cut because their behavior was too complex for an enemy that only appeared once in the game. The idea that
hey asshole, I'm trying to read.
You grab the box and actually throw at you. That's actually kind of neat.
Yeah.
What about these little
enemies that use the environment as much as you do?
This was also going to appear with the ape enemies on Dax. We were kind of in favor of fireflies because the fireflies were much less bug prone. Fair enough.
So, would you say any of these you really wish that they could have included, or would you say it's more so a case where you're okay with the sacrifices?
I would have been fine, but it's understandable. This was only designed for the Sand Shark enemy for the original Ratchet Clank game. It ended up not being the look that we were looking for, however.
Yeah, I can kind of get that. It looks more like a piranha than a shark.
But Trova, Blue Dragon told me that the Sand Shark can look like anything.
Blue Dragon said a lot of things, which I'm sure our Lord and Savior Pedro would say
Blue Dragon
is
also
a false
told
word.
Blue Dragon also told me to go back to the village, and I wasted a whole hour of my life doing nothing because it turns out I was supposed to move forward.
Bomberman clone minigame.
Cute. Oh, that's that.
Again, just a prototype. If I understand correctly, maybe some of these do unlock after you read something else, but I don't remember actually how to do it.
Quick, Tio, hit the turbo and use those ramps as ramps.
Yes.
And
the dragon stop. Sorry. Yeah.
I've got back to Power and you can edit your own special effects. Just enter the debug window and change the values and see what you can come up with.
Imagine a day and age when people do this casually.
Blue Dragon also thought that Maru's voice was apparently going to be something that people would enjoy listening to, and
I mean, they were right, just not attached to Maru.
I will argue that her Styx performance is much more under control, whereas when Blue Dragon, she's literally
screaming all the time. Check out the InsomniacGames.com to learn more about the Ratchet Clank universe and the fun folks will help it. If you join our online community, we will unlock additional multiplayer skins.
No. Maru feels like an anomaly. Nika Futterman can do a character who constantly sounds like they're screaming and still not have it. Oh, I wonder if this is for the big G.
Or Ted Price office, maybe that's what it means. I don't know. Nothing really makes it stand out as hyper-face big.
Is it the dev's way of saying that he has a big ego?
Well, I mean, it kind of reminds me of that. That sketch in The Simpsons episode where it was a clip show. They said, we wanted to ask Matt Groening something, so we went straight to him, and he shows there's an old man taking drugs, and he goes, get out of my office, and she shoots at the camera guy. Well, that was supposed to be something like that in this.
If I recall correctly, that enemy was like a other fan contest donation.
Weird that they didn't show a description for that. I thought
it was called Mr. Feaster. Again, most of these tend to be also inside jokes. So.
Shit, what were we talking about?
Hold on.
I'll go.
Sorry, I'm proud. Says I'm proud of you. So start to be like me. Hank, the fearless wiener dog, was chosen by his owner, Carl Grande, as the de facto mascot for Insomniac Games. These are the pictures made by Carl to push Hank's celebrity status.
Such a celebrity that sadly no one really brings him up these days.
Well, I'm pretty sure the poor fucker is already dead at this point.
Well, my point is, like, I don't think Insomniac actually have an official
Hank
mascot,
says,
do
run
they?
free and let no one tell you how to play. Hank says, there's a fine time to raise them up.
Hank says get glasses so you can see them
Get
proper.
it? Because it's a wiener dog.
I'm sure Hank appreciates those jokes.
Anyway, because the enemies appear also small on the screen when playing the 4-bit comics, we thought we'd bring them closer to your viewing pleasure.
Having to hack into a Sony dev room to access hidden files. Huh, kind of foreshadowing.
I mean, at least here it's on purpose.
Yeah. Of course they had giant enemy rats.
I remember they were from the first bit comic.
Right. It is neat that they...
Now you can play the original uncut and censored version of 4-bit comics. 1. Booty is the older, featuring different gameplay in the cut boss Captain Blackstar. Also a prototype of the
Okay, I found something.
These unnamed levels was the first level ever designed for the Captain 4-bit comics rounds. Because it was very early, many of the concepts were tried here, didn't work, and as a result we cut the level. It is preserved just here. Also, as you can see, the console was supposed to be an Insomniac-themed pyramid console with a VR set, but it was cut away for the sake of, make it something more generic, basically. Go on, Pedro.
Okay, I know that Aniplex right now does have a US branch. Did they have a US branch back in 2006?
Not sure.
Aniplex. So, because according to what I'm seeing here, Aniplex, which is an anime production company, and they also make dubs and stuff like that. They dub their own animes.
Okay, are you sure it's for the game and not the anime Blue Dragon?
No, I'm looking at the credits of the game. Moby Games doesn't really have anime, I don't think it does. But whatever, I'm looking at the actual game's credits page. I mean, there are studios that do English dubs for both games and anime. It's perfectly common.
Also, if I recall correctly, I think this game sadly doesn't have any of the, any old adverts added in the special features or whatnot, unlike the previous two. Unless I'm misremembering. Tio?
What are you specifically talking about?
Commercials, commercials.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, this is the last piece of the extra content that you're seeing, basically.
Huh. It's weird why they changed that from the previous ones, unless they just didn't have ones
They
this
did not
time.
include that. Anyway, since the rest is just, the core-beat comic, I guess we can start with the final thoughts. Leaves.
Well, the game's plot is solid enough. It just kind of gets just kind of stops by the end. With again, it's kind of weird how half of the title characters just stops talking. His last line is "Grrr," and then that's it. I legit wonder I'm not sure what happened. Did they run out of time? Did James Arnold go on holiday, or is he too busy?
I meant to guess they had some dummy lines, but they could not manage to implement them. I don't know.
Could you imagine if they forgot to put them in? And yeah, imagine they forgot to put them in, and all we see is Ratchet miming because he forgot to put his Boy Goku dialogue in.
Go on.
I mean, I can't really speak too much about the gameplay and the graphics because they're pretty much consistent with the other games. Although I will say, if I ever play these ones, I don't think I'm really gonna like the mini game where you have to open a door.
The hacking mini game.
Yeah, those look like they can. Those look like they take a while. Anything else I could mention?
The music, so.
Music, it's fine. That's. I mean, none of these tracks are particularly memorable in any of these games that I've heard so far, but they're not awful. That's something I can give, because I mean, heaven knows I've seen games with god awful soundtracks. I'd much rather have one. I'd much rather have one that just goes in one ear and out the other, than one that stinks my brain.
Like Crazy Boss.
Yeah, can you even call that music?
It was a torture device. Also, just on a sound related, outside of the mispronunciation of data disc, what do you think of Michael Bell's, British performance as Lawrence?
Again, yeah, it's fine, but you kind of gave the game away with that wrong pronunciation. 0 out of 10. I mean, seriously, they couldn't get. Was there no one British at Insomniac that could have corrected them or something?
Closest I can think of would have been Greg Ellis, who was doing stuff at the time, so maybe he could have survived, but he's more Scottish usually than straight up.
Yeah, but Scottish people do pronounce some words the same, so
I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, also there's the how Blackwater actually went. So that's it, James. We're done.
Yeah, that's it for me. I'll be interested to see what the future games. Well, not future. You know what I mean.
What happens?
The next ones.
Pedro.
Okay. Gameplay wise, it's without a doubt the peak so far. And again, the fact that this is the one where we finally got Dr. Nefarious, of course, is a big plus because he's great. And yeah, it's an overall improvement over the second game's plot. I still wish there was some kind of arc given to Ratchet and Clank themselves, because we're still operating on the on the case of the week, or rather mission of the week formula that the second game used, where it's more so about the external stuff outside of Ratchet and Clank themselves. They're basically just the heroes to save it and everything. But again, that's what the future games are for. But no, overall it's a more entertaining plot because of the humor. Of all the PS2 games, this is the one that I think is the funniest, honestly. Like I said, I don't particularly find the satire super duper awesome or anything in these games, so I think the more cartoony, character driven humor like Nefarious's jokes, I feel like, are something that I think works better for these particular writers. Yeah, and the gameplay is the best one so far. Again, this series will keep refining this formula further and further. And yeah, the music is also an improvement over the second game, and the visuals seem like about on par. I don't really notice any major improvements or any major downgrades. It just feels like it's basically around on the same level. So yeah, overall a really solid sequel, and probably the overall best of the PS2 games. Definitely better than Deadlock, that's for sure.
That's what we're doing next time.
Fun. Okay. So yeah, pretty great.
Like I've said, it's my favorite of the original trilogy. It might actually be my favorite game in the whole series still. Is it perfect? No. But overall, it does what a third installment should be, being the best game so far. The gameplay definitely feels brought to its peak, as does the humor and characters, honestly. And hey, going to a full-out war on humanity is, again, quite an escalation. It's like Drek was doing all he did to basically technically take out one world, essentially. I mean, he was causing nonsense on planets, but it was effectively to take over one planet. Here, Nefarious wants to do no less than the entire goddamn galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
He has an interesting enough backstory, being picked on by Quark, and, it is something that Quark himself has to come to terms with here and there. I'll give him credit. It would have been easy to just write off Quark as a jerk who was going to be a villain. Heck, he was the main bad guy actually for the second game, but no, they actually did work to give him some redemption. Now, the trade-off is, a lot of the game story is that of a pastiche, to the point where you get the feeling that stuff is rushed because they're focusing more on the parody aspect, like, oh, Quark suddenly gets over himself, or, oh, Sasha's in love with Ratchet. Again, it's just stuff I go with the flow on, which I guess to give credit to some of the future games, they did try to take some things more seriously, so if you did prefer that, that's what you'd get. For me, the plot still overall works, though. My issue is more so how, sadly, later games will kind of forget about a lot of the cast we established in the original trilogy, which is not to the fault of this own game. Going back to the gameplay, the bosses are definitely the best of the original trilogy out of here. Things get to feel more direct and personal here and there. Some gameplay changes occasionally, but for the most part, it's good old clean mono-y-mono action, essentially. And sometimes they combine the best of both worlds, like the final boss. The music, yeah, I'll admit, Ratchet & Clank music has never been something I super remember. The one I remember most is, well, of all things, Courtney Gears' song, Deaf to All Squishies, because it's such an earworm. And that is sort of the music that she uses for her boss fight anyway. The art maintains good. I do find it a bit weird that we get a bit less behind-the-scenes content, or rather, less of the special features, like, more of the commercials and whatnot.
Rushed beyond belief, so maybe they did not even have the time for that.
That is one unfortunate thing. Like, looking back with more of a savvy sense of the business, yeah, I can tell some signs of rushing. Again, I want to make it clear, it's still the best game of the original trilogy, but it's not quite to Crash Twinsanity levels, but it does have a bit of that, man, what if the game had been allowed to fully blonde some vibes to it? Otherwise, though, it is so far the best Ratchet & Clank game that we have commentated on. It's one of my favorites, and might still be my favorite to this day. Tio, close us out with your final thoughts.
Yeah, this is definitely my favorite of the original trilogy, mostly for the gameplay alone. I think Going Commando was a bit more tight in what it did, but I still overall prefer this one. It's definitely has the refinement. And honestly, I technically like the story better. Again, I get that the first game was more personal. What I personally see in this is the bigger picture, where this function as the culmination. The first game had Ratchet and Clank having to form their bonds, whilst despite having to work out their differences at the beginning. The second game was more of a them adapting to a situation that was more or less just a thing that happened into their lap, but not something that hit them personally until the end, while this instead is a final test that ultimately says yes, these two have proven themselves to be friends by this point that cannot be broken, as showcased in the cutscene after defeating Clonk, which it's not the last we've seen of him either, trust me. Nefarious is definitely finally a breakout villain. Insomniac kinda had a bit of a problem in creating villains until this point, as in not making them super memorable, because Nasty North was just a guy who did not even fight, just chase around. Raptor was far more memorable in his boss fight, definitely too, but I argue that his presence was a lot of, flavor and pizzazz, but a lot less practicality. It felt like before the final fight, Spyro could just, roast his ass and could be done with that.
Hell, when you get down to it, the final boss is kind of Spyro just playing around with him, essentially.
And even then, he has cheat codes at that too. And the Sorcerers of 3 was... Okay.
I mean...
technically a better, in terms of, being present and being a menace. But I would like to remind you, both her and Spyro never speak to each other in the entire game. So, it's kind of a problem to me. So, and with this franchise, we had Sherman Drac, which, was more of a satire angle, which, served as a background thing more than anything until the very end. In the second, we just had Quark impersonating Peach, which had most of the time, so it worked in a different context. But in here, finally, we have a villain who is much more fun to have, and they do not manage to make him too boring or, too annoying with his heaviness by balancing him out with Lawrence. The comedy beats between Nefarious and Lawrence are definitely the standouts for this. They remind me a lot of that scene between Hook and Smee in 1991's Hook, that kind of, balancing out, except with the Wooster and G's mechanic of Lawrence acting like the disgruntled butler, even if in the end he's still loyal to Nefarious, which is, again, a nice subversion because the game makes you think that, oh, Lawrence is gonna betray his master eventually. No, never happens. Sure, he's still, in the end, is responsible for them being stranded because they really not specify the destination for the teleporter, but still he managed to save the life of the doctor instead of just leaving him there to die, which also we'll have to see how that plays out for their inevitable return, because of course they will have returned, and the fandom loved these two, so it was practically a guarantee that they will return. If there's any major complaint that I can have about the story, is something that I mentioned sporadically: the constant annoyance of the galaxy not recognizing Ratchet as a hero. I get it that it's part of a joke. I get it that the joke is that, people believe that Clank is the real hero even if he's playing an actor on TV, or that Quark is, despite the fact that he's a buffoon. But my God, not even in the end, Ratchet can get a bit of a bone thrown. The closest we get is the fact that yes, he has a relationship with Sasha, which will be promptly forgotten 2 games from now. Oops. It's could have been worked better, even as a joke. Speaking of Quark, there's also the other factor. The game is very quick to forgive him for his past actions. Sure, it takes still a bit of time, and at the end we try to make sure that he finds a way to redeem himself. But after this game, most of the stuff that he did in the previous 2 games is not glossed over, but sweep under the rug. And I don't know. I think we should have had, a thing like where he still served a sentence, which, I will say stay tuned for the 2016 reimagining game, because it seemed that Insomniac to try to play a bit with the joke on that. So we'll have to see on that front. Like the others also said, and I also mentioned, the music is just very forgettable, in this one. Only a few things stand out, like Koenig Ears music number, or Nefarious final boss theme. Like I said, that one is genuinely not too bad, gives an identity to the character and all. But, and also the bleepy bloopy sound, music tracks for the core Call comic. The voice acting constantly, manages to be very solid. Some of the jokes don't land as much as they might have had back then. Not as much as people would want to believe, by saying similar. They try to put an argument similar to the God of War Olympus Saga, and says that, oh, these games were completely a product of their times, and they have aged poorly. I can see 1 or 2 cases where it's like that, like that weird Slim Cognito joke that he says at the beginning when we meet him about the Sack Cannon. Just, I have no idea what they thought with that, but I can imagine for the mid 2000 it might have sounded funny to a lot of people. But I only think it's just a few examples, and most of the comedy is pretty solid. Again, like I said, almost all the interactions between Lawrence and Nefarious are just gold, if you ask me. So there is that. And I still also enjoy the satire angle of against over commercialization and sensationalism on TV in this case. Which leads me to the hookup because yes, it's pretty much all that I can say for this game, to be honest. So what happened next? Well, on a meta level, Insomniac wanted to make a car combat game, but realized that Jack X was a thing that was happening, so they had to hastily rework what they were going to a Halo clone instead. And in story, well, it seems that our prayers of having Ratchet being recognized as a hero became a bit too true, because next time he will attract the attention of more sensationalism on TV, specifically people who will want to profiteer off of heroes in gladiatorial combat. Tune in next time for Ratchet Gladiator, not Ratchet and Clank, just Ratchet Gladiator / Deadlocked. See ya.